Installing an outbuilding can be a great way to add extra space and functionality to your property. More and more of us are working from home and looking for better spaces to work in. When undertaking surveys, we've seen all sorts of great and some not so great outbuildings. I'm Paul Badham, Associate Director at Clarke Chartered Surveyors, and in this video I'm going to be talking about some considerations to keep in mind when installing an outbuilding. Firstly, you need to determine what you want the outbuilding to be used for, whether it's a storage shed, a workshop or an office. Knowing the purpose will help you decide on the size, the features and the layout. Secondly, you'll need to consider the design. You'll need to consider the materials carefully, as some are not as durable as others. If the building is sat on a concrete base, you'll need to consider how a timber floor sat on it will be protected from deterioration. Some outbuildings can be of a significant cost and you will not be wanting to replace the floor if it rots away in a few years. When timber buildings sit on a concrete base or a paving which is wider than the building, this can easily allow rainwater to come into contact with the base. Thirdly, you need to consider maintenance. Timber components may need more regular maintenance to protect them from the elements, and you'll need to budget for any initial protection and ongoing repeated applications. You'll also need to consider what material will be used for the roof. Some cheap felt that are normally used for sheds are not as durable as other components. You'll also need to consider whether you need the shed to be insulated, heated or cooled, particularly if you're using the building all year round. You'll also need to consider if you need any ventilation to avoid deterioration of the end finishes. If you're intending to lay floor coverings on a timber floor, check with the manufacturer, as some may not recommend coverings or only recommend those of a particular type. You'll need to decide where the outbuilding will be located. If it's for storage, close to the house might be convenient. For a workshop, you might want it further away to minimise noise. And if you want to run an electrical supply or other utilities to it, the distance will affect the cost of those works. You should always consult a qualified electrician for electrical works, as parts of the installation may need upgrading. You should always check local planning restrictions to understand the allowable size, height and placement of your outbuilding. These laws may also dictate the types of materials you can use and the purpose of the structure. Normally, outbuildings are considered to be permitted development, subject to the following conditions, which include that the building should not be on land which is forward of a wall forming the principal elevation of the building. The building must also be a single storey with a maximum eaves height of 2.5 metres and an overall height of 4 metres, with a dual pitched roof or 3 metres for any other roof. The building must be a maximum height of 2.5 metres in the case of a building within 2 metres of a boundary of the curtilage of your property. You should also bear in mind the height of any base which could raise the structure above this height. No more than half of the area of land around the original house should be covered by additional or other buildings. Please note that these allowances do not include flats and maisonettes or other situations, for example where an Article 4 direction applies, or other restrictions. You'll need to plan your budget carefully, accounting for the materials, the labour, any planning fees, and if you hire a professional contractor. Remember that the building itself is not the only cost if you need to install a base, run services to it and install heating or cooling systems. Costs can vary substantially depending on the quality, the size and the function of the building. We'd always recommend you include a contingency sum for unexpected expenses that may arise during your project. You'll need to consider access to ensure that you can access the building both for construction and future use. You'll need to consider pathways to it, lighting and other security measures. You'll also need to consider any impact on your neighbours and particularly their privacy, especially if the outbuilding is close to the property and boundaries, and ensure that it does not obstruct views or invade privacy. If the outbuilding will be used for activities that generate noise, such as a workshop, consider soundproofing to minimise any disturbance to your neighbours. You'll also need to consider what you intend to use the building for in future. We'd always recommend checking with your insurance provider to ensure the outbuilding is covered under your home insurance policy. This might require additional coverage depending on its structure and use. If you are considering a project and require any assistance, the team at Clarke can be contacted on 02381 550 051.